Hey everyone. Hopefully you can all hear us now. So sorry about that. YouTube decided to be a little bit difficult. Um, but yeah, welcome to today's Figma Livestream. I'm Josh. I'm the community manager at Figma, focusing mostly on online, and I'm a remote employee based out of Long Beach, California, which is just south of LA. And I'm joined with Tom here.
Hey all, I'm Tom Lowry. I'm a designer advocate for Figma, and I'm also a remote employee, and I'm up north in Toronto, Canada.
Yeah, so it's exciting. Next week, we are actually going to be in San Francisco. So if anyone is watching from San Francisco, let us know. Maybe we can grab coffee or something. But yeah, so today we are going to go over kind of just share some of our favorite Figma resources. A lot of people don't know we actually have a resource site that we're going to show off. And then I think I'm going to share some just kind of bonus, non related to Figma, but some other resources that I use. But yeah, Tom, why don't you get us started?
Sure. So the first thing I should probably mention, in case you missed it, is we launched a couple of small improvements over the last couple of days, and I thought it would probably be good timing to just go over what a couple of those things are. So the first one is we now allow you to create multiple components at once. So one use case would be to have a bunch of icons, and you could bring them into Figma just by dragging them from a window on your computer. And so now all of these are set up as SVG icons. These ones are just coming from the Google Material Design icon library. And then once you have multiple sort of like top level objects selected, you can just go to the create component icon in the top toolbar and create multiple components. And with one click, all these components are ready to go and ready to use. So now you'll see they're here. And if you're using our team libraries feature, it'd be as simple as publishing that, and you'd be able to bring those icons into all of your different projects. So hopefully that saves you time. And let's just flip back to a different page. So we could go to this cover page if we wanted, and we could bring in some of these icons. Let's change the fill color. And so one of the things that often happens is you're working with a component instance, and sometimes you need to edit the component. And many times that component is somewhere else on your canvas, or it's on another page. And so you can see that we're on the cover page now, and all of these components are on this what's new page. So if you right click on your component instance and say go to master component, you can now edit that component, and we give you a little option to return. So when you want to go back, it's a little easier to return to where you were working without losing context. So another little feature that hopefully saves you some time.
Quick note on that too. If that component lives in a different file, we still open it up for you, but it opens up in a new tab. So then you'll just have to switch back. So if the component lives within the file, just in a different page, that return to instance button will show. But we may consider adding it to switch between tabs in the future, but hopefully that helps.
Yeah, and it's sort of like less useful when you're switching between tabs, because you don't, when you flip between the tabs, you don't really lose your place. It's easy to get back to. But yeah, hopefully that helps. And one last little thing, you're probably used to going to figma.com/releases. This will be like the most up-to-date, detailed account of improvements and stuff that we've made to Figma, whether they're big releases or small little bug fixes and improvements. But we also have this page, figma.com/what's new, that we just launched. So when we launch more substantial feature improvements, you can find out about them here. So let's get into some Figma resources. So you'll probably see earlier on in the stream, I had the screen up. This is figma.com/resources. The resources are grouped under a few different categories here. Some of these are more like guides and best practice articles, or people's accounts of using Figma on their team. We'll probably do another stream that's centered around API and extensions, things that are built on our Read API. But for today, we're going to be focusing a little bit more on assets. So in this section of Figma resources, you'll find things that you can download to help speed up your workflow. Everything from iOS and Android resources and component libraries so that you can have some of that native UI elements in your designs, things to speed up the wireframing process, device mockups. Someone here has even created a developer onboarding guide that you can add to your Figma team and then share with a developer just to sort of like walk them through some of that functionality. And we've loaded a couple of these into Figma. If you haven't been to the site, one of the things that we allow you to do on a lot of these resources is when you click the button, it's going to open the Figma file and create a copy of it in your account so that you have it for later. So we've done that now, and so Josh and I will just take you through a couple of these resources and where they might be useful. So first up, we've got this isometric frame that Dustin Tanner built. And what's cool about this is that it uses components where you can update a two-dimensional version of your design, and then it's set up to be on this isometric mockup with a couple of different background colors, which is really nice. And so all you have to do is update this component. You can see if we start moving things around in here, it starts updating in your mockup. So that's a nice way of just presenting your work or creating something for a presentation. And Greg has built a really elaborate user flow kit. I have it in here twice because he's built two versions. One has sort of a light mode and one has a dark mode. But this kit is really extensive. So this is for creating like flow diagrams and stuff. Here's the kit itself with all of the different assets it comes with, but just to give an idea of what types of things you might create with it. If you're trying to create like a sitemap or an overall like top level flow of like how a user is going to get from point A to point B, and you know, all the turns that they may take along the way to get to different places. This is a great way of doing it without having to get into sort of like high fidelity screens. And so what's great is there's a really elaborate set of components, and they're all existing on this page, but he has them all laid out really nicely here. So if you want to use these like flow arrows, you can. And the nice thing is about these arrows is that when you start using them, they're all built with constraints so that you can scale them properly without having to worry about all those lines getting distorted. And one thing that's nice about these kits is that you know, you may decide to use them, or they may become the basis for something that you build. And so this is just a nice way of being able to sort of like see all of these different things and see how they're built. I would say like what we find a lot of teams are doing is creating these little sort of like micro libraries for different things. You may have like Windows cursors and Mac cursors and you know, these flow connectors and post-it note components, and they're really handy for different parts of the process. So just having a library that you can always reference when you need them is really handy. So it's just a matter of like adding these to your Figma account, and then you can publish them. And once they're published, it's a matter of just dragging in the assets that you want from the assets panel. There's also a few, I'm just showing one of them, but I think there's a Safari one, there's a Chrome for Windows one, which I have up here by Roman. And Roman has a resource online called Set Product that has a whole bunch of really elaborate kits. Some stuff is free and some stuff is paid, but there's always a lot of like thought, care, and attention in his kits. And the nice thing about you know, this browser mockup, you want to mock up what a website's going to look like. All of the constraints are already set up for you. So if you have to resize this window, again, you're not having to do that all over again. This is another really handy one that I've seen a lot of people using, and this is by Anton, who created a redlining kit that has little components with all the constraints set up so that you can sort of like annotate your designs. So redlining is one of those things that I think is like, there's not as much need for it with some of the built-in Figma inspect tools, but there are a lot of times where you want to like add additional information, especially if like you're using, you know, some sort of token for sizing or something, and you want to say that something is spacing large versus spacing small. Having these little components available so that you can literally just scale them and, you know, type in something, whoops, like spacing small, and then just be able to like size that to an element and extend it when you need it. These are really, really handy. Um, you know, obviously you won't need them for every case, but again, having to not build these when you need them is super handy. And then there's a few other little details, arrows, notes that you can, even if you're just building a diagram to call out features on one of your screens, you could just have these little note things. And all of the colors are mapped to styles. So if you want to change these colors to sort of like fit your brand style, it's just as easy as clicking on this little icon, and then you can update the color across the whole document. Anything to add so far, Josh?
No. Just a minor technical thing. For some reason, your screen's flickering a lot, so I was wondering if we could jump to my screen and then just kind of follow me. You can still kind of drive, but I'll
Sure.
jump into the Figma file. Cool. Yeah.
So the next one I'm gonna open up is the wireframe kit by Rioni.
All right. Let me open that up. Okay. Cool.
Cool. So this is another really elaborate kit, and what I really like about what Rioni's done is that there's not a lot of high fidelity information that's added to these. It's like very light. It's like sort of just to get a rough structure of what you're working on, sort of like down without having to worry about what things look like or even having a color palette. It's got a whole library of components, and he's got a little getting started thing here where he's used the font awesome icons throughout this, so he's got a link to that, and then you can obviously publish these things to your library. But again, this is one of those ones that I think is sort of like more in the true spirit of wireframing, where things are not overly detailed, where people are going to get distracted about the aesthetic of it. So yeah, this is a really nice one.
Yeah, I think I was just gonna say I use these kind of like wireframing kits just to get ideas out, because I don't know, often I make like a bunch of rectangles and circles and things like that that are just gray, but then I start obsessing about the color gray, and then making sure things are like, oh, if this is an avatar or an image, like it all needs to be a dark gray versus a light gray, and then I start spending too much time on it. So these, like having something kind of already built out where you don't think about it, because really you shouldn't spend too much time on like a low fidelity wireframe kit. You shouldn't care too much about it. So having one of these, so whether you take this and build something a little bit different out of it, or add more elements to it, but it's super handy.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm going out and I'm going to go into the material design theme kit next.
All right, follow you there. Yeah, sorry everyone about the live stream. We use Zoom since Tom is in Toronto and I'm in Long Beach. For some reason, OBS, which is the thing we use to encode the video for YouTube, doesn't like to play well with Zoom. So we're going to hopefully improve these over the next coming weeks. And as we do different types of streams, we're going to change it up a little bit. So, but yeah, here we are in the material kit.
Cool. So this was a kit that I built before I joined Figma, and it was around the time that Google had launched the next evolution of their material guidelines. And I think that when they had released this, there was a sketch plugin that allowed you to configure some parameters. And I was trying to think of like a different way of like, how can you configure all of these things? So we used components pretty heavily in this design. And I thought that this is a really good resource if you're building something in material design, but it also may give you some ideas about how you could set up sort of like your own themable kit if that's something that you wanted to do. Maybe you're building a kit to support different brands, but you want to have just like it easy to customize. So what we did was we built the first page of the document is like the theme configuration, and there's a few key things when we zoom in here. So the first thing that you'll see is that we've got a few basic shapes, and these are the same shapes that Material gives you the options of. So you've got a fab button, and you have sort of like extended fab button, which gets used for things like this. And then you also have some surfaces. So those surfaces are things like cards. And what we've done is when you go into, this is one master component, which you'll see here. And there's these other three components, which are actually nested as instances within this one. And so what's cool is we can actually like turn the circle off and turn on the diamond layer. And then everywhere we use that, we can customize, these fab buttons to look like in that shape. And so if we go back to this button and we turn off the circle one and turn on this diamond one. Oops. I don't know if you can see. I think the diamond one and right here. What's happening here? Yeah, so you can see that these have these little cut off corners now. And this is actually a nested component, which is right here. And so what's cool is that you'll see now that when we scroll down here, this button has these little cut off corners. And if you scale up this shape like this, you're actually changing the size of those little corners. So it's all very modular and easy to customize. And so after you've remapped the font styles to new fonts and you've picked your colors and configured these shapes, then all of the other components on this page here, on the material components page, will update. So if you were to update this color to like a red color, everywhere that color is used gets updated. And there's obviously a couple different shades that you'll have to update. So hopefully that is a useful kit, just to even give you some ideas about how you may build your own. Anything to add, Josh?
No, yeah, I think it's so things like material design and Apple's human interface guidelines, like they can be kind of a lot to parse through. And so having a kit kind of to actually play around with the examples are super helpful. Because if you just read through them, I mean, you'll learn a lot, but it's kind of difficult to then see how would this actually play out if you're going to build, an Android app or a website with material design or an iOS app. So yeah. And
For sure.
you put this one all together, right?
Yeah, so I put that one all together. It took a long time just because we sort of structured all of the different Figma components a little bit differently. Sorry, I left the file if you want to follow me again. There's a ton of components, as you'll see in this file. And I think one of the interesting things that came out of this project was when I brought in the initial sketch file, which was from Google, there was like a lot of like textiles that were sort of like textiles as components. And I would say that there was probably like about 80 to 90 components that we were able to omit from the Figma version, just because the way things work in Figma. So it was a lot less to maintain in terms of like having type styles plus components, plus those nested components. It was just a lot that we went through a pretty elaborate process, but in the end, it simplified, I think, being able to use all of these things as well. And you'll see here, like when I probably should have updated, if we go back here to like this surface, the same thing happens with the surface component. So if you wanted to use those little those little chopped off corners, when we go back to it may take a second to propagate, but anything that's using those components will get updated across the design.
That's awesome.
I'm just going to jump out now, and I'm going to go into the app icon template by Dennis.
Awesome. So real quick, everyone who is watching. So right now, this is kind of a great example of observation mode that we have in Figma, since Tom actually can't see my screen, and because the stream is delayed for you guys by like a minute or so, we're kind of just having to talk out loud about where we're going and what he's doing. But as long as I'm observing Tom within a file, if he switches pages or zooms in, all of that shows. So that's why you see the pink outline or whatever color his cursor is. But Thanks for bearing with us. We do plan on improving these in the future, so appreciate it.
For sure. So this is an icon template that Dennis created. Dennis is one of the design systems lead at Kiwi.com, and he's been a huge advocate for our product and is building a lot of cool stuff. There's even, I think, a few presentations online that he's done. I don't know if they're all in English or not, but Dennis has written some awesome articles, which are also on the Figma Resources site when you go into the guides and best practices. So definitely check that out. This icon template I really like because it gives you context of where those icons are going to show up. So you get an idea of what it might look like in the App Store, in a settings menu, or on a notification that's showing up on your home screen. And the component you can edit here. So if we want to add an icon here, maybe we make a happy face.
This is a great happy face.
I'm glad that you're enjoying it. Some of my finest work. Oops, I'm going to delete that. I know you all came for the happy face. And so I think I have to set all these things to scale.
Outline stroke.
Yeah, and so once you update that there, it appears everywhere else. So you have this nice quick way of even being able to just make tweaks to it and see what it's going to look like in line, which is really handy. And then I believe on this page, Dennis has a bunch of stuff set up so that you can export it at all the different sizes as well.
Yeah, going back to the other screen too, when you're designing app icons, something that is often overlooked is how it looks on different backgrounds. So right now I think this is just an image here. Let me jump in here and see. I like how he names this irrelevant. Yeah, so there's a background, which is also a component. I wonder where he's pulling that background from. Let me go to master component. Oh, it's this first one. So if you were to change this background image, you can try out different ones. So using Unsplash is a great way to try different dark backgrounds or light backgrounds, just to see how your app will look on them. Maybe too much contrast or saturated too much. So definitely give this a go. Cool.
Cool. I know, Josh, you had some resources that you were going to share outside of Figma.
Yeah. So first of all, there was a question from Kathleen in chat about where to access all of these. So let me pull up my browser here. So all of these, if you missed it, are at figma.com/resources. And then they are kind of organized by different categories. So we have assets, courses, guides and best practices, and then extensions and APIs. Tom mentioned this earlier in the stream that we'll probably do another one more around the extensions. But if you just go to resources, here's kind of the most recent ones. And then under assets is where you will find all of that. So that icon app icon template that we were just working in is right here. You can click into it, and then there is a open the template in Figma. And the nice thing about that is that it just opens directly in your Figma account, and you can get working on it. You don't have to download it. So all of that's available there. Let's see here. How did you create the isometric symbols for that mockup file? So that is kind of a bit of a hack. So I think eventually we'd like to introduce kind of some more drawing tools being able to skew. But essentially what Dustin Tanner did with that mockup is he took a shape, rotated it, then grouped it in another file, or put it in a group and then rotated that, or then what am I trying to say? And then changed the height of that group, and it creates that kind of isometric. So if you look at that file, download it, and just kind of inspect how he's built those elements, you can see that. I think, Tom, do you know if he tweeted about that process somewhere, or there's a blog?
I just put a link in the YouTube chat where I think Dustin has a little video where he walks through exactly how he does it. So that's probably the best resource to like replicate the effect.
I'm not seeing your link. I wonder if it canceled it out.
Oh, weird.
We'll
I will.
we'll make sure to put it. We'll put some show notes on these and put all of them. But um, yeah. So other resources. So just real quick, we talked about material design. I have that here. This is where you can kind of read more about this. So if you're just getting into design, I highly, highly recommend these. So both this and then the iOS human interface guidelines. Um, it kind of goes into a lot of their principles and, you know, why things are certain ways. So if we were to go in here and look at action sheets, let's load this up here so you can kind of see what an action sheet is, you know, making sure you provide a cancel button, things like that. This will make, if you are working, maybe it's your first iOS app or Android app, I definitely recommend kind of sticking to the guidelines. It just helps you get a better understanding of how they built them. They are guidelines though, and I know a lot of, like I've been doing a lot of research about just kind of different user flows within iOS specifically. And there's so many things that even Apple breaks in their own official app. So definitely look at these as guidelines, but super helpful. I think you can actually download these as a PDF too. I'm not 100% sure, but so yeah, that's Apple's material and then material design. And then if you're looking for some great simple icons, I think we also have this on our resource site, but feather icons are completely open source. So you can take them, you can mess around with them, change them, you know, create new ones. They're all SVGs, so you can download them and then just drag and drop them into your Figma file. But I do think we have a resource with these set up as a component or like a library. So that's that. Another favorite thing, resource that I use is a type scale. So if you're setting out type, oftentimes you can be kind of a daunting task to figure out what sort of you know, different scale, like what should your headers be, what should your paragraph size be. So this it's called type-scale.com. The nice thing about this one, there's a bunch of these tools out there, is it is hooked up to Google Fonts. So similar to Figma, where we have all of the Google Fonts in, you can just come down here and choose a different, let's go to, let's find Roboto Mono. So then you can, you know, grab a Google font here, and then there's just different scales. It gives you the pixel value, which we use within Figma. You can adjust the weight here. And this just gives you a good size. So like paragraphs would be set at 16. You know, maybe your H4s at, or H5s at 21.3. So play around with these. They have different scales, which I've always found interesting with kind of like musical scales, I guess. But yeah, that's the type scale. SIP, I don't have this one installed on this computer, but I've used this tool a lot, and essentially just creates a shortcut. It lives up in your dock. I think it's Mac only, but you can just kind of quickly grab different colors and it adds it to your clipboard so that you can, you know, color any object that you have within Figma. So yeah, check out that. I think there's other tools that are similar. Contrast. So contrast is a accessibility checker for different colors. I actually do have this one installed. So you grab your text and then you grab your background, and then it tells you kind of the score based on the WCAG. This is, you know, important as you start, you know, designing your apps. You know, you should start with accessibility first. So I use this tool all the time. And then last is this fun kind of mock-up tool that I think is rather new. They have a free download. I think it has like a watermark on it, but essentially what this lets you do is create little animations or just kind of cool 3D screens. So let me open this up. I got something prepared. So it's called Rotato, and I just grabbed this file from within Figma. So I just took this iPhone 10 screen size. This was from, I think, our Figma 101 live stream that we did. But if you open this up here, you can actually just drag this around and you can kind of create cool 3D things. They have presets. So if you wanted to like show that, and then they actually have like animations with amazing kind of like lighting effects. So if you are working on an app and you want to kind of create a video for a landing page, this is an amazing tool. So I think it does cost something to get rid of a watermark when you export it, but it gives you a lot of control over the lens and what the environment's reflecting and all of that. But yeah, those are the kind of other tools that I use or resources. Trying to think, do you have anything else, Tom?
No, I was going to say, if you want to flip back to my screen, I know you'll probably get that little flashing thing. Is
Yep.
that, and I'm only highlighting this one because I've seen it come up a few times on the Spectrum community where people are like recreating the material icons. And I know that sometimes can be a lot of work to like download them and import them. We do have all the 5 different styles of material icons in addition to those feather icons. So if you don't want to have to worry about turning them into components, these ones are all good to go.
That's awesome. Um,
I
so
also saw a question there, just even what about haiku? And I think that is probably going to be not specifically haiku, but I think we are going to do some future episodes just around some other tools that integrate with Figma. So yeah, I think that would be a good one to cover if people are interested.
yeah, awesome. So I think that's all we have for today. Yeah, thanks for bearing with us on these kind of technical difficulties. If you do have any other feedback, suggestions, definitely reach out to us on Twitter. I'm at NeverSitDull, and Tom is at _CA. We're going to put together these links and throw them in the description or comment. But yeah, thanks for tuning in with us, and we will catch you next week.
Thanks so much, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us.